Hey everybody, Jobbin from the Time Pals here. Just wanted to give a shout out to my partners over at Legendary Supplements and the Legendary Legion. Their Crack and Intense Focus Blizzard Mojito flavor is something I've been using all week to focus on my work and get it done quickly and efficiently. It is a nice, cool, citrusy blast and provides a nice, clean energy that focuses on mental clarity as opposed to physical energy. So no crash, no jitters, and the benefits speak for themselves. I definitely suggest you try it, and we have a code for you to try at checkout. Just punch in Time Pals.
Okay, hey, it's Underscore again, and this week the Time Pals begin wrapping up Hot Pal Summer. We talk about video games a lot, especially retro gaming, and I wanted to take a look at our childhood gaming days, especially during the time of our lives when we maybe only got a video game or two during a birthday or Christmas, had to ride that sucker out through the year, whether it was good or bad.
Yo.
With me today is ShadoSpartan, and Shadow just released another video to his channel. So what you got going on right now, Shadow?
It's called Rise and Fall Civilizations at War. A fun RTS game similar to like Warcraft 3, but you can actually like take control of your hero unit, lead them into battle with your army.
You know what's great is I play the hell out of both those styles of games, and I've never played one that combined the two, and I'm sad I missed it. Like, I don't even remember that game coming out. Was it a hit?
I'm going to say no, because even before its release, like a year into development, the development studio, Stainless Steel Studios, had to shut down after its publisher, Midway, stopped funding it. And then I guess Midway just took what was left of its code and everything and just handed it off to one of its development studios. I think it was Midway San Diego. And they just had to take what was there and just try to piece it together. Trying to imagine you're just suddenly given this game from another studio. You have no idea what their intention was or how the code works, and you just have to piece it together. And that's why it feels kind of like a mess, but still they had something there.
I did see I already watched it, and it's one, it's a great retrospective, and two, like, I kind of see what you're getting at. But at the same time, when you're watching it in motion, it looks fantastic. Like, even now, like, you couldn't tell it was from back then. Like, you would think it was relatively recent, within like the past 5. Do you know if anybody has made something like that recently?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. That's why it kind of feels a little bit like Mountain Blade in terms of running around the map, collecting recruits, building your army kind of thing. And then you get into combat, and then you take control of your character and you lead them into battle.
Right, and that's what I fucking loved about it. I still haven't taken off that bear head, and it's like not even good armor, and I'm running around with it all fucking day,
just for looks.
And then always with me, in my heart and my soul, is Nickel.
Up, down, left, right, BA.
Nice.
Start.
Never heard of it. So basically, thank you guys for coming. The idea about this episode kind of came to me because my kids were moving quickly between lots of forms of entertainment. Probably the same thing with you, Nickel. Shadow has cats, so it doesn't apply. But they'll go from like a tablet show, and then they'll play Roblox, and then they'll go from that. They'll listen to Kid Bop Kids on their Alexa, and then they would complain to me that they were super bored. They would go on the Xbox, complain again that they're super bored. They'll go outside for 20 minutes. And it's not like an old man screams at cloud moment. I'm kind of jealous of it. It's like, it's really just me, old man screaming at old man me. Looking at what they're doing, And I'm kind of looking back at the summers that I used to have, and I'm guessing you guys were kind of the same because none of us were, millionaires. It was a lot of like, you didn't get everything you wanted. You didn't have everything ahead of you. I don't know about you guys, but my parents, to get me out of the house, I was in Little League, I was in Boy Scouts, I was in a ton of shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of that, it did the reverse. Because whenever I got a video game, I played the fuck out of it. Just because it was something that wasn't me having to go somewhere else. I got to stay inside the heat. So, and looking back on it, I mean, I know you're a little bit younger than me, Shadow, but when I was trying to figure, obviously, the childhood thing out, was back in the 90s. So I'm kind of like looking at it through that, the time pals and growing up gaming in the 90s and all the good and bad that came with, figuring ourselves out back then. And really, I just kind of want to ask you is like, so what do you remember about the first system that was, quote unquote yours, or the first game that really hooked you? And then you were like, well, hey, this is what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah, I was kind of lucky because I had two older brothers who, similar kind of thing, like you were saying, that once they discovered gaming, I was kind of, sucked into it also. Man, trying to think as far back, I think the first console we had was a Sega Genesis.
Ooh,
and I'm trying to remember some of the earliest games on that system. I want to say it was a 2D shooter similar to Mega Man called... It was a game called Vector Man. Okay, I'm surprised you guys know about it, because whenever I tell people about it, they're like, no, never heard of it, never played it.
Please describe Vector Man, because Vector Man, when it came out for me, I was already in the Genesis mode, and I'm like, oh my god, they did it. They actually made a Genesis game that looks like a Super Nintendo game. And I was like high-fiving myself because I was so pissed off that my games all looked like shit.
I think it's funny that Shadow calls it a 2D shooter, but like back then, we probably would have called it 3D.
Oh my god.
I mean, I do remember playing through a couple of levels, but I always got stuck at that one boss that you had to double jump like pixel perfect over the boss, but you always had to just do one jump and shoot to hit him in the one spot that would damage him. Do you remember that boss? He looked kind of like a robot with a ball for his legs that he would just roll across.
From an old gamer, me, to a relatively younger gamer in you, flashing part of the boss, that's its only weakness, is every boss fight.
But it was because he'd be off screen and he would just come charging at you. And by the time you saw him, it was already too late. And you just kind of had to guess, thinking, I think he's charging at me, so I got to double jump. And you just hope that you timed it perfectly. And there was only one time I actually do remember beating him, being super excited, jumping around. And then it was like a whole new world, seeing the next level. But I got so good at the earlier levels to get to that.
And then you promptly died.
Yeah, exactly. No, I've had many of those ones where I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get to here, and that's
I mean, we started off with an NES. I think we definitely just started off with like Mario and Duck Hunt. We had, I think, some hand-me-down games. Load Runner. Which was like a difficult game and a very deceptive cover.
Load Runner, I know the name. I don't remember the game.
It was, I don't know. You're supposed to get treasures and like dig some blocks out in this mine or whatever. Get treasure, avoid the bad guys. But anytime you would dig out a block, after a little bit, it would return. And you couldn't jump or anything. So it was like you had to move yourself based on digging out blocks and stuff. And it was
dig dug with extra steps.
One game I definitely do remember that I know not a lot of people remember. And this is probably one of the hardest NES games that you'll ever play. It was called A Boy and His Blob.
I know this one.
Okay, so I'll explain it. I'll explain it to Shadow. So ShadoSpartan.
I used to dream. No bullshit. I never got a chance to play it. It was one of those ones where I was never bought for me.
Oh God, you're lucky. Mm-hmm. Oh man. Okay, so ShadoSpartan. Here is a boy and his blob. There's essentially no backstory. You just start the game and you are in front of a boy's house
So far.
and he has a blob. Okay, you with me so far? Okay.
You might want to describe what the blob is. It's not sexual.
The blob is a literal pear-shaped gelatinous blob. Okay. In its neutral state, it's like it looks like a pear almost.
Okay.
And it just follows you around. Okay. Now, as the boy, your one power, or I should say your one piece of equipment, is
Okay.
jelly beans. Now, these jelly beans are flavored, strawberry, licorice, peach, orange flavored jelly beans and such. And you throw them to the blob, and each jelly bean flavor gives the blob a special power. Or I should say it turns the blob into something else. Like one flavor would be a hole in the ground, or one flavor would be a trampoline.
Or a ladder.
Or a ladder, exactly. Now, the point of this game is anybody's fucking guess, because I don't know what the point of the game was.
So, what I remember, this is not me Googling it, but and I'm serious. I don't. Here's how badly I wanted to play it. Is I kind of remember the point because I remember reading about it in like old Game Pros and stuff, and going like, I want this game,
like a Nintendo Power or something.
Yeah. Oh well, I mean, yeah. Well, Nintendo Power was for the rich, so fuck off. But so the knockoff ones, your Game Pros and stuff, were the ones where I'm like, okay, I'm all in on this one. From what I remember, you're trying to get him back home, like a la E.T. But the villain had something to do with like, fuck it. The villain had something to do with like dentistry. So like, which is where the whole jelly bean thing came into play. I might be making this up because I literally would stare at this game cover and I would think to myself like, I wish I had a friend, and I wish he could do stuff when I fed him. And there was elements of like, man, because the concept of it for me was super cool, honestly. And like I said, I vaguely remember the whole like you're trying to get him somewhere. I remember the villain had something to do with health. Like actual health, like either he was a dentist or he came from a planet that had some kind of dental pun to it. But that was kind of it. And what I do know is that they tried to remake the game, and I never played it. But they did do it one other time, where they were like, "Hey, we're gonna bring back Boy and His Blob, where it's gonna be for you underscore." And I said, "Sweet," and I didn't buy that. I didn't buy that shit either.
I'm gonna have to look it up. Like redid it for SNES or what?
No, they remade it I want to say for the Game Boy DS, or not Game Boy DS, for the Nintendo DS.
Oh, okay.
They then tried to do it again, like, and then I remember the last time they tried to redo it. I don't remember what they called it. I don't know if it was like a reimagining or if it was like an actual sequel.
Okay.
It didn't get enough money, and it just never came back. Because the one thing about Boy and His Blob, and Nickel kind of alluded to it, it's a really interesting idea to have this NPC that has all these functions, but it's the Nintendo, so it can really only do so much. You know what I mean? It's only going to act so much within the AI. It'll still try to kill itself at every opportunity.
Oh yeah, totally. And it'll the blob would get stuck somewhere where you are where it's totally unreachable for you. And that like things like that would happen, just like in a lot of AI today.
Yeah, exactly. It never got better.
Right. I remember recently I was watching a playthrough of Rainbow Six Rogue Spear.
Yeah,
so
nice.
Like old Rainbow Six game from like late 90s, and you're trying to save the hostages and they just don't move. You're like running away and it's like, follow me, but they're just staying put, blocking your other teammates too. But yeah, I mean that's what the AI of Boy and His Blob was like. But God bless them, they tried.
No, 100%, man, 100%. For me, as I grew up in the, it's funny because like being slightly older, like I grew up in the 80s, but the 90s is when I was an actual like, kid, if that makes sense. So my older brother had a Commodore 64, but it was too fucking complicated. And then he had an Apple II, which had Wizardry, Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord, which was like, if you know your D&D, that was like one of the first fucking like computer game versions of it. And I distinctly remember deleting his characters and him being really pissed off. And then the other system that I had that was his, all this shit was hand-me-downs, obviously, was the Atari 2600. So that's how old I was. The Atari was already in the past, but one of the first games that I remember giving a shit about was Pitfall. That was one of those games where I remember playing it and thinking to myself, like, oh, I'm a dude. I'm jumping on top of alligators. I'm swinging over vines. I'm basically Indiana Jones, but I didn't make that connection. And I remember thinking, like, this game blew my little mind.
Right.
Like it was like, to me, it was almost like playing a cartoon. Looking back at it, it looks terrible.
Oh,
like
yeah.
it looks like garbage.
Yeah.
But at the time, I'm like, oh, I'm actually playing a living cartoon. This is amazing to me.
Yeah.
And it's back in the day. It's like it's one button. You know what I mean? It did everything. It wasn't surprising now, but it's nice to see that I was kind of right. Where when you watch all these like old school like best of Atari channels and stuff like that, it's always named. It's always named as a really fun game. I'm pretty sure it would hold up if one of my kids played it. It's easy to learn. You understand the alligator is bad, scorpion is bad, and kind of like your load runner, you're just trying to get treasure.
Right.
So the next one is a game that kind of blew your mind when you were young, kind of made you a fan of the franchise into your adult years. I know I'll start for this one. Like for me, I know everybody would love to say like Super Mario Brothers or something like that, but for me that was a lie because I love Super Mario, but it was never like my game. Like I stopped playing it after Smash Brothers. So for me, there's actually two. The first one was Double Dragon 2 for the NES.
Yes.
That game was a game where if you were at my house, you had to play it with me or we would not talk. Like sleepovers, birthdays. I didn't give a shit if it was somebody else's birthday. If you were roughly my age and you were over at my house, you had to be Jimmy, or I think it was misspelled as Bimmy, but you had to be one or the other, or you were going to have a long night by yourself. The next one, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, PlayStation 1997. I never knew I loved that style of game. I guess it invented the term Metroidvania. Well, I don't even know what the fuck that really means, to be real with you. But I'll never forget when I first played that. And it was all 2D. This is back when the PlayStation was doing 3D and that 3D looked like shit. And they fucking rolled the dice on this 2D animated game, much like Pitfall. I'm like, oh, I'm playing a living cartoon again. Like, it scratched that part of my brain where I'm like, one, it's huge. Two, it's got all these RPG elements. And then three, the music is amazing. Like it's all this gorgeous symphony. It obviously in the name, but it all like gave you this world, and it was one of the first times where I got immersed in it, like just 100% full stop. Like everything Alucard did, I'm like, this is going to be what I'm going to play forever. And every single time there's a Castlevania one, and there, aside from Game Boy ones, there hasn't really been a quote unquote good one. I've bought it every single time, and then I'd immediately regret it because they can't quite catch it anymore, that lightning in the bottle anymore. But yeah, every fucking one, man, like I'm all in. Like that lasted well throughout my adult years. And then Double Dragon 2, like every now and again they'll make one. I'm like, this game is just a beat 'em up. There's no way that's going to be any good, and they're all fine. They're all okay. It's all still just punching and uppercuts. But I will still get that itch in me that I had when I was a kid and go, fuck, man, Double Dragon, I love that shit, and I will just download it again.
I think for me, there's a bunch of different games that like blew my mind at different stages in life. What I mean is, like there were a lot of games when we switched over to the Sega from the NES that were like, oh my god, look at these graphics, and it was like mind blowing. Jurassic Park, for the Sega.
Jurassic Park did blow my mind.
That was I could play as the raptor. What?
Yeah. The dinosaurs were pictures from the movie, and they looked like pictures from the movie.
Right. And the same goes for like Mortal Kombat. I was like, look how real these are, because they were real, you know?
I had speaking of Mortal Kombat, one of my best friends, he wasn't allowed to play it because the characters were obviously motion captured from the actors, and his parents were so strict that the moment they bought him the game without asking anybody what the game was. I'll never forget this shit.
That's what parents did back then.
Right?
Right.
So just shut up the kid. It's his birthday. We both play the game together. And they watched at some point in time after like 2-3 hours of us playing in this room, we had this awkward moment where like his mom or his dad walked in and you could feel like the eyes staring past us.
Oh.
And then whoever that was walked out, and then they both walked back in. They were like, we need to take this away from you.
Oh,
I don't know what we did for the rest of the fucking night, but it wasn't that.
It wasn't MK.
No. Whatever. We probably played Sonic 2 again for the 8th millionth time. You know what I mean? Like it was that kind of bullshit.
But going back to what Shadow said, you know, like Vector Man for me was like, wow, look at these graphics, man. These are great.
Yeah.
Like Vector Man was a cool game. Although that was a difficult one too. That was one I couldn't be good at without cheating.
Okay.
You know,
no bullshit, Shadow. If you would have asked us back then, that is a 3D game.
Yeah.
It was a 3D game. Vector Man might as well have reached out on the screen and gave us a pat on the head.
Yeah, it had shadowing. Come on. I mean, that's 3-dimensional, right?
I guess it makes me think of Doom when they call it Doom 3D, but it's still technically 2D, but they just kind of deceive you in how they present it.
But in terms of games that like real quick again, another mind-blowing game. Anything from the N64. So like Mario 64.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I saw that, I was like, what?
See, I was a Sega guy. So I stayed with it. I didn't buy an N64 until I bought it. They basically released the GameCube, and they were basically giving them out for free. I bought an N64, I want to say maybe $100 max, and they threw in a Game Boy. And I'd never owned a Game Boy my entire life. So I actually played more of the Game Boy than the N64. Yeah. With the exception of wrestling games. Because fuck you guys, but WCW Revenge and all that shit were amazing.
Yeah.
Were amazing games.
But the one game that I could really say like got me hooked on a franchise that I would buy if they released another game today, I would buy it in a heartbeat, would be Splinter Cell.
Oh, I thought that was in the 2000s.
Shit.
Like since game one, I was like, oh, this is the shit.
You know what? I think technically Shadow is right, because when did the first Splinter Cell come out?
First 2002.
But I understand what you're saying.
Disqualified.
But we'll let it slide because Splinter Cell should come back someday. Yeah. Honestly, as Metal Gear got really goofy, and Splinter Cell could bring it back to reality.
Well, back in the 90s, I wasn't much of like for a long time, I wasn't much of like a sucker for franchises. You know,
right.
I know there were some people who were all about Final Fantasy all the way through NES and, stuff like that. And I was just like, I like a game if it's fun, and plus franchise wasn't really a huge part of gaming back then.
I disagree. Here's why. So basically, if you had a good game, obviously they were going to make sequels up the ass. So I didn't buy a lot of games, but I would rent games when I was allowed to, based off like the idea that the first game was good. So I think so the franchise thing was a thing. But right. I guess if it didn't catch you back then, I guess it wouldn't have mattered.
Right. But I mean, you can't, it's not like the franchises of today. That's
Yeah.
mostly what I'm saying. Yeah, you had
Where like Call of Duty is an actual like $1 billion thing. I get what you're saying.
right,
Yeah,
right.
I
I mean,
understand.
sure, you had Adventure Island and then Adventure
Mhm.
Island 2, you know, and then I don't even know if they made an Adventure Island 3, but still, it was like, okay, it's still the same game.
Right. You don't have to reinvent anything.
Right. Where it's like the franchises of today, like Splinter Cell, for instance, they had a great concept for a game, and then the next game they built on top of it, and they made it better. And then the next game built on top of that. But the franchises, if you will, back in the day, back in the 90s and stuff, that was just like, oh, it's the new game. We maybe added like one new feature. Mega Man, perfect. Okay, so Mega Man is the perfect example of what I'm talking about,
Mm-hmm.
right? Up until like what, past Mega Man 3 or Mega Man 4, it was just the same game, different bad guys. They didn't really add a whole bunch. Now,
How dare you?
when you started adding in like Rush, right?
They
That was the
added a
dog's
dog.
name.
Yeah. Goddamn right. You say his name with some pride. You put some respect on that shit. And by the way, it's Rush Rock and Roll because Capcom just does that kind of shit.
Right. But
no,
anyway,
I agree.
That's. I mean, I would say I had more different games that blew my mind growing up.
Yeah, but as opposed to like following a franchise.
Yeah, versus like, oh, I'm gonna buy this because it's, part of the franchise that I love.
Well, good for you. I'm a sucker. So like I own Double Dragon 1, 2, 3, and 4. You know what I mean? And then the Genesis one. I'm glad you never wasted your parents' money. So like, how about you, Dom? Or how about you, Shadow?
A game that blew my mind and made me a fan into my adult years. Oh, that's easy. Warcraft 2.
Oh, god damn it, that's a good one.
Never played the first one, but I just remember my brothers got the game. I still remember seeing the CD case that it came in because this was for the PC.
Right.
Whatever it was, Windows 95, whatever it was.
Yeah, I think that's literally, I think you're right.
And I was just amazed at how much fun the gameplay was at the time, making you feel like a general, commander, whatever you want to say, giving orders to build bases, forward outposts, training, commanding troops, taking over the map, invade the enemy bases. And that just stuck with me and why I love RTS games so much. And even now, I'm still playing WoW and looking forward to the next expansion, The War Within.
You know what I will always give Warcraft 2 credit? Is it gave the individual units characters. So like they had their own voices, they had their own, I don't know what to call it, but they had their own personality. Where a lot of games, when you play Command and Conquer and stuff, like so did I, and they would have like the voice samples and stuff, but they didn't feel any different. You know what I mean? When you played Warcraft, your Horde characters, quote unquote, felt different than your Alliance characters. Versus, let's say, Command and Conquer, I forget what the good guys are called, but your good guys and your NODs basically are the same. They're basically the same. It doesn't matter. The only difference is one has a nuke and then one has an ion cannon. Warcraft is one of those games where everything felt so different that even if it was just a different graphic, it felt like you were having, it felt like something was new if you played from one campaign to another. I will always love that about that series for sure.
I just hated playing as the humans facing off against orcs, and there would be a death knight would come just in range and fire this one ability, and I just hear it would always just piss me off because the AI just knew as soon as their death knights had enough mana, they would send them over and just one shot a unit. It just pissed you off so much.
It's I'm guessing you followed it into World of Warcraft, obviously. You know what I mean? Warcraft 3, all that good stuff.
Oh, yeah. Warcraft 3. Apparently, there was a point-and-click adventure game called Warcraft Lord of Clans.
Never came out.
But it never officially got released. And from what I've heard, it was because back then, that was Blizzard that actually had high standards.
You know what's funny you mentioned? So you guys heard of the CDI? So the CDI, if you don't know, was a CD-based game system, obviously, before the PlayStation. And there's a famous Zelda game. So they had a deal with Nintendo. This is a truncated version of it, but they had a deal with Nintendo. Nintendo said, you can use our characters, but you can't use our staff, basically. So a bunch of guys who didn't know how to make games used Super Mario characters and Zelda characters. The games are notoriously bad. They're on the worst games lists on every single YouTube video, podcast, you fucking name it.
Yeah.
The animations in the Zelda game are so freaking famous for being abjectly terrible that they've all become memes. The
Exactly.
Warcraft guys hired that animation studio for their point and click adventure.
That makes sense.
Right? And it's a Russian studio with like 4 guys. And I don't know if you've seen the footage of the Warcraft.
I have.
Have you? That's why it looks like that.
Okay. It all makes sense now.
Yeah. It looks like garbage. Here you have it at the height of their writing of the lore, and they hire like your uncle's 10-year-old kid with special needs. It's not great. But I will say this, a part of me still kind of wants to play it because that time period of Warcraft and Warcraft 3 and whatnot, they were on a high in terms of telling a story, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
I would love to play that series just to see what it was like.
Right.
So moving on, obviously back in the day, you were going to be stuck with a bad game too. So anything that you remember from back then where the box art lied to you, or your parents got you one that was abjectly terrible, but because you were stuck with it, you had to play it or had to find a reason to love it?
My parents never really bought us a bunch of video games, if any, really. Like we used a lot of our own money because we had a paper route. So my brother and I, we would pool our money. Basically, the way we got our Sega was we pooled our money and took our NES over to Matt's Game Exchange.
I remember them.
Yes. And we traded in all of our NES stuff and the money we had saved up, and we bought a Sega, and some games and controllers and stuff. Now, I don't think I ever, up until I was way older, I don't think I ever bought a game that I was stuck with, because I would sit there in the aisle at Matt's Game Exchange for a solid 20, 30 minutes debating between 2 games and weighing each option and how to spend my, $10 because I wasn't about to buy a shitty game.
Right.
So I think I escaped, to a certain degree, the scenario you're painting out. But that's only because I spent so much time really deciding on what game I wanted to buy.
Well, that says a lot about you because it meant your parents trusted you with money. For me, it was a lot of guilt purchases. So in terms of we'll flip it then. So any purchases that you obviously spent your own childhood hard-earned money with a paper route, that you regretted, you bought and you're like, oh, I made a bad choice.
I think one year for Christmas we got a bunch of Jeffrey dollars, right? Toys R Us gift certificates. Yeah. So, and I think I bought a Game Boy, and I bought a Spider-Man game for the Game Boy. And I think that's the only one that really comes to mind. Again, up until my later years where I'm I see a game at I'm 18 years old or something, I see a Xbox game at a GameStop and I buy it and I'm like, oh man, this game is so shitty. I wish I didn't buy this. But I think as a kid, the Spider-Man game for Game Boy. I regret. I'm like, this game fucking sucks.
How about
But
you, Dom? I'm sorry. Go.
no, I was just gonna say that's really the only one that comes to mind. The only times I really regretted it was when I was at like Blockbuster. You know, we're like renting.
Yeah, but Blockbuster, you were allowed to get something shitty.
Yeah, but you're still like, well, fuck, there goes my weekend.
Yeah,
you know,
no, you're right. No, you're right.
You're right. Like, man, I had big plans to like just play this video game all weekend. Now
you're
I'm
right.
like,
we all got Clay Fighter and was like, oh, this is bad.
yeah, I'm like 2 hours in and I'm like done with it. All right, well, fuck, there's always a next weekend.
Yeah.
You know.
It's funny you mentioned the whole like Xbox thing. There was a solid minute there where I finally bought an Xbox. Right, this is back when I always had a job, so I bought an Xbox. I'm like, I'm gonna get every great game, not realizing that they barely made any. So like, you know what I mean? I was just like, oh fuck, man, like I did a bad thing. Like they had some good ones. Don't get me wrong, they had some really good ones. At the end of the day, I had some like good collection, but it was just like a lot of like, oh man, am I buying Madden again?
Yeah.
You know, like, god damn it.
That's why you should never buy a console right when it releases, because if you're lucky, there might be a couple of games, but...
And that's the thing. That was, I mean, not to go off a tangent, but that was one of the first times where I bought a console like on my own, and I regretted that shit so fast for like the first year.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Okay, worst game that I was stuck with. At first it was going to be Mortal Kombat.
How dare you?
I just wanted to like say it was because I would try the arcade ladder, and this is when I discovered how most recently someone came out with a video about the AI and how it worked, the difficulty scaling.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense why in the arcades why they did this. So like the first guy was on easy difficulty. You felt like a badass defeating him, like, oh man, you know, I know the moves. And then you play the second guy, and he's on normal difficulty now, where he's actually hitting you back, throwing you, but it's still doable. You can land hits, or he just doesn't block much.
Right.
And then you get to the third guy, who's now on hard difficulty, and he just blows you up. You try to land just a single blow, and he just blocks everything, throws you. I mean, you're just like, what the heck? And then that was when, if you put more quarters into the arcade, it would drop the difficulty down back to normal.
Oh,
I didn't know that.
And it might be this guy and maybe the next guy is still on normal to keep you playing. And then that third guy would then go back up to hard difficulty and just kick your ass.
I did not know they did it that way.
That is news to me.
That's how it worked.
That's amazing.
Yeah, if I could find the video, I'll share it with you. But yeah, he explains how the AI, or at least how the system works.
Because Midway is a pain. So one of my favorite, fuck them. So Midway, one of my favorite game series is NBA Jam, right?
Right. Yes.
So they made it so that what's his name? Tobias. I think it's either Ed Boon or I forget Tobias' first name.
Well, the two creators of Mortal Kombat.
Actually, I changed my mind. I think it's Ed Boon.
Ed Boon.
John Tobias?
John Tobias was the other guy.
Yeah, asshole 1 and asshole 2. Fuck them. So Ed Boon had a secret coding in the game where if you were the Bulls versus the Pistons always won. Because
really?
Yeah. So basically, if you don't know your basketball, the Bulls beat the Pistons. So basically, like, if you play the Bulls, which in the 90s was the hot team because my Warriors were not great, with the exception of Chris and Tim, they were not winning a lot. You played the Bulls, right? So even though Jordan wasn't on the team, they were still really good. And I distinctly remember running into the Pistons, and it was always last shot wins, and they would always fucking win. It would drive me nuts. And then years later, Boone's just casually, yeah, we programmed it to fuck you Bulls players. And I went, oh, life sucks. Adults suck.
Damn. So if I did have to pick, it's actually a game called Torrens Passage.
Don't know it.
Yeah.
It's a point and click adventure game. And I just could not figure out the puzzles or what I was supposed to collect and then combine it with other stuff to unlock the next level, like most point and click adventure games. The only fun I had with playing this game
Uninstalling.
was there were certain stuff you could click on that would get Torn killed. Like usually it was falling off a cliff and he'd just be and he'd fall off screen because it wasn't graphic.
Did you name it after kids you didn't like and just purposely throw them off screen every time?
Pretty much. I'd just be like stuck and I'd just be like, you know what, go walk off this cliff, and he'd be
So honestly, Shadow, I've never heard of the game. What's it about?
Is it like a mist or a riven kind of deal?
No, it's 2-dimensional, not quite like Myst, where you either walk to like the left or the right, or there might be a ladder that goes up and down
like
to
King's
different
Quest?
areas.
Okay.
I think similar to Warcraft Lord of Clans.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah, in that similar style. But I want to say it's like a sci-fi. I say sci-fi because it's on a different world. And it had something to do with his grandparents or adopted parents get taken by an evil wizard or something.
Tale as old as time.
And he's trying to find them, but it gets confusing because the beginning intro showed, I think, his actual parents get killed and he's just a baby and he gets taken. And when you beat each level, it tells you more of the story about what happened. It gets so confusing. I'd have to revisit the intro.
How old were you when you played this? This sounds terrifying.
It sounds terrifying, but like I said, it's not graphic. It's just story-wise, you're just like, wow, this sounds very adult. But as a kid, it goes over your head.
Oh, shit. I've never heard of this game.
Yeah, I need to revisit it too, but I just remember like not getting through that game at all. Damn. But I do remember one funny part was I would always have him jump into a moat, and then it looked like a crocodile-looking thing would appear, and you just hear crunching sounds, and then it burps and it swims away. And it always cracked me up every time.
I can just picture a young Shadow going like, "Take that, Dad! Take that, Dad!"
Or I just get so bored because I'm just like, I'm stuck. I felt like I explored everything, clicked on everything, and there's just nothing to do. So I'm like, I'm just going to kill him off and then leave this game.
See, the part of the reason why I was curious about it was I owned a Macintosh when I was a kid before I got a PC. And they only made shit like that for the Mac. Like, you didn't get cool shit. You got point-and-click adventures up the yin-yang. Some of them were great. Like, LucasArts made some really cool, fun shit. But for the most part, you didn't get anything cool. You got stuff like that, like all these like weird off-brand things. And they were all point-and-click adventures. And they were the kind of things where like they were made in a way where you could get stuck, and you didn't know why. So I don't know if you guys are going to know this game at all then. So my game is called Wall Street Kid. And just to backtrack a little bit, about around 1991, I was at a KB toy store in Concord with my older brother. And he purchased something random and then saw that there were 2 games on sale with box art that were amazing. One game had a painting of a mulleted white dude wearing a Macho Man style sunglasses and scream punching through the title of his own game. And as he punched it, the flesh on his knuckles tore apart to reveal like a metal like skeleton underneath. It turned out that ended up being a classic called Shatterhand. And I bought Wall Street Kid. So Wall Street Kid, if you've never heard of it, was developed by a company called Soulful, whose only other game was called Casino Kid. And you can kind of see a pattern of me making bad decisions because the box art was this bright, colorful comic book thing where a dude in a nice suit a kid, quote unquote, on a nice suit, stood on top of a pile of money, and then there were these pretty girls on the cover, and on the back, you got to drive a boat, and you got to make your dad proud. And I'm like, I'm buying this game. Turns out when you plugged it into your Nintendo, you're a 26-year-old stock trader, and the entire point is that your uncle has died. He gave you $500,000 to turn a profit, so you have to buy $1 million house, keep your girlfriend happy, and then if you don't eat and exercise, you die. So to put it in perspective,
So it's the
you
Sims.
have to make $600 million to beat the game, which is $1.25 trillion in today's money. And if you were in 1991, that would have basically like the richest person in the world was worth $5 billion. So nobody that made the game understood money in a stock trading game.
Wait, so this was an NES game?
This was an NES game.
Really?
And those motherfuckers, so they suckered me in. It's a comic book art front.
Right.
So you're thinking to yourself, like, I'm going to be rich, which obviously not being rich, that appealed to Underscore. And it, not knowing what the fuck a stock was, not knowing what a Wall Street kid was, the back pictures look like an action game. I'm driving a boat. I'm living in a mansion. I got a girlfriend.
I'm making my dad proud.
Yeah, right. I'm making dad proud. Finally, something that I could do when he's not home and project. And you get the game and it's fucking text based.
Oh,
I'm 10 years old. I can barely read.
Right.
You know what I mean? I went to a shitty fucking elementary school called Ignacio Valley.
I don't like reading at school. What the fuck makes you think I'm going to read at home?
Right? And I have no concept of money. Girls were still icky, but I loved boats. My dad owned a Bayliner. I'm like, we're gonna fucking bond. So it ended up being this bizarre thing in my Nintendo collection for years. And the fucked up thing was, 20 years later, it would get name dropped when GameStop was doing its whole stonks thing as a RPG that, like, quote unquote, first got my generation of games. Fucking bullshit. Bullshit. I played that game. It's got fake stock names. I didn't understand anything, and I would buy and sell. My girlfriend would leave me every time. I would die of a heart attack because I didn't know how to eat vegetables, and the game would just end. And the bullshit thing was, one, I mean, obviously childhood trauma that taught me to hate the rich, but two, I never made enough money for the fucking boat. So I
never even got the boat.
Right? I never saw the goddamn ending to this stock trader game. That 10-year-old Underscore was like, oh, I'm gonna experience love for the first fucking time in my goddamn life. So yeah, obviously they suckered me in from the get-go with that shit. So to kind of lean into that, my next one, like the first game you guys thought was, so basically there was a concept for me back in the day when I was a kid where a game could be poorly made and I wouldn't realize it because I was a kid. So I thought to myself, like, I'm not old enough for this game. This is a game for adults or something like that. So while it's not a real question, like, do you guys have any memories of games where you're like, okay, this game probably isn't bad. I'm just not able to play it, or I don't understand it, or the concept is way over my head?
I would say I never played it myself, but I watched my friend play it. But like Myst and Riven, I was always
I would agree.
I was always like, why the fuck are you playing this? Where's the fun in this?
Right. This does not look fun.
So it's even something like, even back then I was like, well, visually the game is great. I get it, but I don't want to fucking play this game.
The game is you're pushing dials and you're trying to find pages in a book.
Right.
May I remind you, with my last story, I went to a really shitty elementary school. You know what I mean? I could not do math to this day because of that shit. So I do not blame you hating Myst, because somebody bought that for me. Oh God, when I was in middle school, and obviously Macintosh, like I said, so that was like one of the only games out, and I did not finish that game. I could not give a damn. This is back when Doom 2 came out, I want to say. So I'm watching all my PC friends like shoot demons in the face, and here I am slowly turning a clock to open up another clock so I can get a page in a book.
Now, again, in the game's defense, like, it was visually great for its time, and I'm sure it was a great puzzle game, but, you know, but me as, a kid, I'm like, this is fucking stupid.
No, it is. A great puzzle game to me is Jenga. Fuck that bullshit.
Jenga for the NES.
Yeah, right. How about you, Shadow?
Well, most of the games, it's hard for me because most of the old games I can't really play now as an adult, or at least I've been finding more and more of them. If you know what I mean, where it's like as a kid, I'm like, oh, this game is too adult for me, or I just can't figure it out. But I haven't played it now as an adult to see, was it really a bad game? The only thing I can think closely to it kind of changes your question a little bit, where Thief, the Dark Project, as a kid, I just didn't understand how to complete the objectives. So I just thought this game sucks.
No, Thief is amazing. By the way, retrospective available at Shadow's YouTube.
Right. Shout out. But I would mainly, just to have some fun with it, I would just run around and just take out the guards. And sometimes I might get lucky and I just collected the right thing that I was supposed to get, and I would beat the first level and then go to the second one, and same kind of thing. I'd get lucky, get to the third level, and that's usually where I would get stuck. Because even now as an adult, I feel like it's poorly made and confusing to try and find your way to collect the item. But as I've gotten older and now that I understand games better, it's now one of my favorite games of all time.
Oh, hell yeah. Thief is an amazing game. I'm honestly surprised nobody remakes it.
Exactly. There's really just a lot of fan-made missions if you really want to enjoy that, which I will be doing in next month.
Oh, nice.
I'm trying to remember what it's called. For September, it's called Thief: The Black Parade. It's a mod of all the best Thief fan-made map makers, whatever title they have. They all came together and they all, I guess, designed their own missions tied together by this one story.
Wow.
So looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, that's gonna be dope. I mean, for me, honestly, the only one that really comes to mind was I owned The Simpsons Bart versus the Space Mutants for the Nintendo.
Oh.
And when I bought it, I thought to myself, well, surely they wouldn't just slap the Simpsons name on something like half-baked and terrible and lazy.
Right.
It was a fucking disaster. Like, it was like the Red Cross handing out blankets style disaster.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, okay, I don't remember when that game came out. I didn't put the year down, but I was young. And I remember thinking, like, okay, this is too hard. This must be made for people older than me. I'm just going to quit. And then a couple years later, I bought a Genesis, and then I got it again because I'm like, you know what? I'm older now. I'm more mature. I'm 13. You know what I mean? I know everything about life. I'm going to buy this Simpsons Mutant game. I'm going to beat this bullshit. Just like you said earlier, I went to the exact same part where I got stuck and fucking got stuck again. Like,
of course.
Life is a flat circle. And I remember thinking, like, but this time around, I'm like, oh, this blows.
Yeah, the game is just bad.
And I never played another one since, until they released a really good one on the Xbox. I want to say
Hit and Run
around the time of the movie, and I actually really liked it.
Was it Hit and Run?
It was after Hit and Run. Hit and Run was fun.
Oh, okay.
They released a really good one after it too, which was actually like written by the writers. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, that Bart versus the space aliens or space mutants or whatever, that was a very deceiving game because
yes,
you always saw the Simpsons game in the arcade, and you're like, oh
Yes.
shit, yes, okay, I'm gonna walk around the streets as Bart, fist fighting space mutants. No, you're going around spray painting things.
Yeah, you're going not to spray painting things. You're only spray painting purple things.
Purple things,
red.
yes, purple
Because
to red.
the aliens the aliens draw their power from purple items.
Yes, and then you have your
Oh,
X-ray.
Jesus Christ.
Then you have your X-ray glasses. That'll show you who the space mutants are.
Oh my god, we were morons in the Nintendo era. I swear to fucking Christ. Here's the thing, though. I was such a big fan of The Simpsons. I owned, mind you, not a rich kid. My big Christmas gift one year was I owned the talking Bart Simpson doll,
Nice.
which I got it taken away from me because the top of the head was thick plastic spikes.
Yes.
I got mad at my sister and I hit her with it. So that was gone. And then I owned my favorite book, no bullshit. I was in the 5th grade. We had to write down like, what was your favorite book? And everybody had like dumb bullshit, like Huck Finn and stuff. My favorite book was the Bart Simpson's Guide to Life because I'd never laughed harder reading something ever. And I'm like, well, this must be literature. And that shaped me for years. Like David Sedaris was my favorite author because he just wrote funny bullshit.
Yeah.
And like anytime I could find anything like that, immediately a fan.
I thought that was going to say that like I thought you were going to say that like shaped your childhood because that's when you got put in the remedial reading class.
You know what? I was an excellent reader. No bullshit. Excellent reader, partly because of The Simpsons. Very, 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 very quality writer, which you can't tell from this podcast, but I swear to God.
No, you're a good writer. You're a good writer.
But fuck off. But just like I said earlier, my school's math program was garbage, and I can barely add and subtract. Like, we'll just put it that way. We did take some remedial stuff later on in life. We'll just say that. And then finally to put a bow on this whole like Summer of Pals growing up in the 90s thing. For you, good or bad, your most iconic retro gaming memory from that era?
Oh, probably sitting there one summer, just playing Earthbound all day until I beat it.
Ooh, I wasn't a Super Nintendo guy. I never played Earthbound.
It's either that or like just being at a sleepover and just playing like video games all night.
Yeah.
You know,
I do miss that. Yeah,
like there were a couple specific examples. Like I remember just staying up one night with a buddy and we just played NBA Jam Tournament Edition like all night, you know.
Oh, good game.
Yeah.
Good game. Fuck the Pistons.
Just
a good game.
You know, using all the cheats and stuff and trying out all of the characters.
Big head mode.
Yeah.
Play as Bill Clinton. I remember all that shit.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say just definitely a memory that stands out for me because I wasn't so much of an RPG player, but Earthbound got me into it. But yes, like just one summer, it had to have been a full week at least, where I just like sat there all day and played Earthbound until I beat it.
I've always wanted to play Earthbound, but I didn't own a Super Nintendo. And then by the time I never actually technically ever owned one, but by the time they re-released it, I never got a chance to do it.
They have it out on the Switch.
I might download it just because of you, honestly, because it always ends up on these top lists, and I never tried it.
I mean, it's a good one. I mean, it's not, you know, it's kind of biased coming from me, or not really biased, but like being not an RPG player, I'm like, it's a RPG.
Well, here's the thing, though. Here's the reason why I like that is, so not being an RPG guy, it has to have something special for you to be like, oh, I'm sticking with it.
Right,
like,
right.
I'm not an anime guy. I never finished a full episode of Dragon Ball Z, and I still have watched all of One Punch Man because I'm like, oh, this is hilarious. It's taking the piss out of all the stuff I hate.
Right.
So it's got to be special, you know?
Yeah. And I would make that same argument too. Is like, I'm not just swooning over every RPG that comes out. Like that's one of the few I've ever played and finished.
No, that's cool. Honestly, that's actually really cool. How about you, Shadow?
It would have to be the day my parents told me I wasn't allowed to play shooter games anymore.
Oh, no.
Because before that, I could play GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64, but I guess my parents watching me shoot other humans, despite the graphics looking terrible for the time. They were, those parents that thought, oh, these violent video games are probably bad for their developing brain.
Oh, my God.
They just didn't like to see that. So they would translate that thinking like, oh, I might, look at this in real life or something.
I had the opposite.
To Rob.
I just remember the sit down where they told me to come in their room and they're just like, we don't feel comfortable seeing you playing those types of games.
Wow.
But despite that, it was okay if I went to a friend's house. So shout out to my old friend Kyle, who invited me almost every weekend to his house.
What's up, Kyle?
Still play GoldenEye and Rainbow Six.
Kyle, I hope you're doing well in the Martinez detention facility. I'm sure they...
No.
That's awesome.
Well, I mean, even when I got to a teenager, I still couldn't play a lot of M-rated games. But I remember my oldest brother, Matt, would argued on my behalf and would say Halo was the first game or first M-rated game I could play because I'd be shooting aliens.
Oh.
So they were okay with that.
Okay.
And for a little while, I was getting away with playing Grand Theft Auto 3 and Vice City.
I was just about to ask.
Until the day, I think it was I stole a guy's car. I didn't go fast enough, so he stole the car back. And so I started fighting this guy and killed him on the ground. And I started kicking him, and a pool of blood starts, flowing. And of course, my dad walks by and sees this, and he got so furious, I don't like what I see. You're done playing these games. And so we had to get rid of Grand Theft Auto. And it wasn't until I turned 17 that I could then say, I'm now old enough to play Grand Theft Auto. You can't tell me I can't play. They kept arguing. I couldn't play Grand Theft Auto 4, even though I was 16, I think, at the time.
I just love the image of young Shadow standing up for himself. And he's like, Dad, I can beat up a prostitute and take her money back if I want to.
No.
That's fucking great. Like I said, I've never met anybody whose parents were like that. Not that it's a bad thing. I mean, obviously you're trying to raise your kids with morals,
right?
But to show the difference between me and you, my dad used to ask me to record the Spice Channel in case he missed something. I'm not even kidding. He would say, "Put this tape in. Record it from here or here. Don't turn on the TV because I learned very quickly you can record something without the TV on." And then at this time, just push stop.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could at least say my parents tried in case they turned out bad. They'd be like, we tried. But I just understood they're video games.
I don't know.
I can't do that in real life.
There's something somewhat criminal about taking GoldenEye from somebody. I swore by that game. That was the best game on N64, in my opinion. And to let your kid play it and then be like, no, actually you can't anymore. That's almost criminal to me.
Right.
You've already seen it.
Yeah.
You've already seen the violence.
Yep.
You're not gonna learn it anymore.
That's amazing. Because GoldenEye, like I said, I never owned it. Well, I didn't own an N64 until I bought one way late. So I was all about the wrestling games. I owned I only owned a couple of them. I owned what is it? Star Wars Starfighter. So that was a cool one.
Okay. Yeah.
GoldenEye was the first one I bought. I remember thinking to myself, this game is incredible because I never had it. In my opinion, it's cartoony enough where I'm surprised. I would be surprised if somebody felt like it was uber violent.
Right.
But I guess it's bloody, but I just don't remember it.
But it's not really bloody. I mean, it's a blurry red splotch on the body.
Yeah.
There wasn't any puddles of blood. We're not talking like GTA 3 violent.
Right.
Yeah, no, for real. Interesting. So I got a couple. I don't have them written down, so I'm just kind of going by memory. But one of the things my parents would do was they would never really surprise me with stuff. And then just one random day, my mom brought me Super Mario Brothers 3, and it wasn't for anything. It wasn't like I did well in school or anything like that. I didn't do my chores or anything like that. But I'll always remember it because like that box art, that bright yellow box art, Mario in that classic pose, and she just I don't know what kind of guilt she had, like as a parent now who has bought his kids stuff because I did something. I'm like, I better make it up to them somehow. I don't know what background thing that she thought she insulted me with, but I'll never forget her bringing that one in and just kind of sitting with me and watching me play it. Years later, she would end up passing from cancer. And it was one of those memories I'll always have because it was one of those moments where I'm like, oh shit, like I do that now, where I'll just like surprise my kid. They don't have to be perfect, and I'll just be like, hey, here's a thing for you to do. You know what I mean? And I will sit with them and watch them do it the same way she did. So, and there's an element of like satisfaction of like, oh, I kind of understand what you like, even though obviously, you know, I'm not monitoring you every single hour of the day. And now we get to kind of sit and share that thing.
Yeah.
And then for me, it was cool. You know, then like I said, I carry that now. The other kind of retro-y thing that I remember is, this kind of sounds so stupid, but I grew up obviously being of color. I didn't really grow up with a lot of racist stuff. And there's your sleepover thing. I had a sleepover with a bunch of friends, and one of them rented Zelda. So I never played before, and I was bored out of my mind because I didn't realize it was a classic. I was playing like baseball games and shit. And one of the dudes at my party was a guy named Byron. He was a black kid. So one of my friends from back in the day. And Byron had a black mom and a white dad. So me being very naive, I didn't know what an Oreo was. So everybody the whole night kept calling him Oreo. So Oreo, you should try Zelda. Oreo, you should do this or that. Now, I knew his name was Byron, but me being young, I went, I must have misheard your name. And your name must be not, I didn't hear Oreo. I heard the word Oriole. Like the bird. Because I'm a baseball fan. So if you know Baltimore Orioles, I'm like, well, this must be a name and not just a bird. So the rest of the night, I kept calling him Oriole. So now, mind you, I knew his fucking name was Byron. But like, I kept thinking, well, I must be wrong. His name is Oriole. Byron must be a nickname or some shit. And at some point in time of the night, before we went to bed, both of us being brown, he turned to me and he said, I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact words, but he said, like, I don't think you should call me Oreo anymore. And I went, oh, isn't that your name? He said, my name is Byron. And then he had to explain to me why Oreo was offensive. And I went, first off, I thought you were a bird. Secondly, wouldn't you need another black person because it's black, white, and black? And he didn't talk to me for the rest of the night. And I'm just like, okay, I'll never forget that for as long as I live, because there's an innocence to it that I will never get back.
Hold on. It's not racist. I thought you were a bird.
Yeah, for real. And to be fair, if you told me Oriole is a regular street name, I would have believed you. I would have pondered back then. Yeah, everybody calls himself Oriole. You know what I mean? There's a Batman and Robin. So that's all I got for our little slowly winding down the summertime. Thank you guys for indulging me a little bit. I wanted to kind of go back to the retro stuff for a minute, just to kind of talk about like a lot of the nice thing about having this podcast is I can kind of like see the things that shape you guys, and it kind of reflects back to me. I'm like, well, what were the things that I remember from, you know, the back in the day that kind of shaped the nostalgic stuff that I'm into.
Yeah.
So it is kind of nice for me to kind of scratch the surface a little bit. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The good old days when games were good and working. When they,
But before you needed to update.
it just seems like nowadays everyone complains saying like, "Oh, these graphics, they suck."
But
Yeah,
I don't know
right.
when.
It can't get any
would've
better.
blown your mind now, right? Back then, I should say, you would have been like, "There's no way NBA Jam is going to look any more realistic."
Right.
But hold on, Shadow. When you say working, like you use that term loosely, right? Because NES
Very
games
loosely.
right out of the box, you'd have to like blow into and like put in just right.
Right. Yep.
Like, I don't care how new that game was. Like, you're going to have to finagle it into your NES to make it work.
And only you knew how to make it work.
Yeah, only you knew how to make
course.
your system work.
Yeah, that's right. Only your breath worked.
And somehow, like, leaving the door open helped. Like, no, you can't close the door. You got to leave it up.
Wow.
Like some superstition.
Oh, no. I had a buddy who told me that you had to put a book in there. And I said, look, that's enough for your sass, Oriole.
Now, for me, my Nintendo 64, I had to blow it 3 times before it would work.
Right.
I'm not even kidding. If it wouldn't work when I hit that start button, take it out, blow it, put it back in. Wouldn't work. Take it out, blow it. Still wouldn't work. Take it out, blow it. 3rd time's a charm. Every time.
Right. Yep.
See? It prep you for the future, because no matter how pissed off your wife gets, Shadow, I mean, she's always happy. So for underscore for the Time Pals, that's all I got for this. Dom, or Shadow, you got anything else?
No, I'm just gonna keep laughing.
Nickel?
Nah, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, guys. We've got some mini episodes coming up we think you're gonna love. We're gonna do our best to get the video stuff coming in, so stick around for that. And for underscore for the rest of the Time Pals, we'll see you next time.